Captain Robinson, a submarine officer, was unexpectedly terminated from his position after 11 years with Agora, a company specializing in the recovery of sunken vessels from the ocean floor. Prior to his tenure at Agora, Robinson had a commendable career in the Navy, which he cherished. However, his dedication to his profession led to personal sacrifices, resulting in his wife seeking a divorce and his separation from their son, Martin. This turn of events left Robinson disheartened, particularly after his unwavering commitment to the company. Despite his consistent performance, he received only £8,600 as severance pay, and lacking a formal employment contract, he was unable to claim any additional compensation. Following his departure from Agora, he encountered two former colleagues, Kirsten and Blackie, at a cafe. They shared their frustrations regarding their abrupt dismissal without justification, with Kirsten revealing that the stress of supporting his family amidst significant debt had compelled him to resort to antidepressants. Meanwhile, Robinson felt increasingly ashamed to face his son, who was now living with a wealthy stepfather. It was during this meeting that Kirsten recounted one of his expeditions with Agora prior to his termination. He once traveled to the Black Sea in search of a submarine abandoned by the Nazis, which was rumored to hold gold nuggets valued at millions of dollars. The vessel was located, yet the company had not engaged with the submarine, leaving it undisturbed at the ocean floor. This inaction stemmed from a conflict between Russia and Georgia, as the Black Sea serves as the boundary between the two nations. If Agora were to proceed, their involvement would be perceived as interference in the political matters of both countries, which they sought to avoid. Disheartened by the company that dismissed them, they resolved to retrieve the treasure using a submarine, with Robinson appointed as the leader. To fund the expedition, Kirsten requested that Robinson and Blackie meet with an investor named Lewis. Upon arrival, they were welcomed by his secretary, Daniels, who assisted them in articulating their purpose. In 1941, the Nazis faced a financial crisis and sought a loan from Russia, which was then a neutral nation. Russia complied, hoping to avoid conflict, and provided the loan in gold, dispatched via submarine. However, the submarine never reached Germany, allowing Hitler to continue his occupation of Russia for 4 years. Years later, rumors about the submarine emerged, and Agora was the first to locate it. Unfortunately, shortly after this discovery, tensions escalated between Russia and Georgia, prompting Agora to abandon the find to steer clear of the conflict. Robinson aimed to recover the treasure using a submarine and sought an investment of $180,000 from Lewis, who promptly agreed in exchange for a 40% stake in the venture. He also appointed Daniels as his representative for the expedition. Following the ratification of the agreement, Blackie and Robinson commenced the recruitment of personnel. Robinson expressed a preference for half of his team to be Russian, as they would be navigating Russian waters. The initial selections included Reynolds and Peters, both of whom possessed naval experience. Subsequently, Levchenko was enlisted for the kitchen, Zaitsev for the engine department, and Baba for sonar operations. Morozov was appointed to interpret the diagrams, while Robinson also selected two dependable divers, Fraser and Gittens, who would later be responsible for retrieving gold from the German submarine. On the day of departure, a young man named Tobin arrived, claiming to be a friend of Kirsten. He conveyed the distressing news that Kirsten had taken his own life to secure insurance money for his wife and had left a will instructing him to apologize to Robinson, as Kirsten could not participate in the expedition. Sensing Tobin's desperation, Robinson invited him to join the crew, to which Tobin consented, departing with Robinson's team for Sevastopol, the location of their submarine. The submarine they acquired appeared aged and corroded, yet Robinson maintained a positive outlook. He promptly instructed his crew to prepare at their respective stations to inspect the submarine. Several issues were identified. The ship's battery could only be charged to 70%, the fuel tank was leaking, causing fuel to spill onto the main turbine, and most alarmingly, there was a lack of safety suits and only a single radio for communication. Despite these challenges, Robinson remained unconcerned as long as the submarine was capable of diving effectively. He further clarified that they would refrain from using the radio to avoid detection by Russian vessels patrolling above. Once all inspections were concluded, Robinson outlined the objective of their expedition: to venture into the Black Sea in search of a German submarine believed to be transporting hundreds of kilograms of gold. After allocating 40% of the profits to the primary investor, Lewis, the remaining shares were to be distributed equally among the crew. However, this decision did not sit well with several members, including Daniels, who expressed concerns that crew members might turn against one another in pursuit of larger shares. Robinson chose not to engage with Daniels and instead left the scene, instructing the crew to commence operations on the submarine. Fraser also voiced his dissatisfaction with Robinson's choice, rallying his British colleagues by asserting that they deserved a greater share than the Russians, whose contributions he deemed less significant. His discontent was further demonstrated when he discarded the meal prepared by Levchenko. Among the Russian crew, Zaitsev rejected assistance from Tobin, viewing him as an unskilled member of the team. Nevertheless, Tobin remained composed and complied with the directives given to him. The following day, at the control center, Robinson encountered Tobin, who had been preoccupied with a photo on his cell phone. It was revealed that Tobin was admiring an ultrasound image of his girlfriend, prompting Robinson to remark on the prospect of wealth and the joy it could bring to his future children. Suddenly, an alarm sounded, indicating a critical issue. The crew halted all activities, including Fraser, who swiftly prepared to shut down the engine. Baba, stationed in the sonar section, alerted them to the approach of a Russian warship. Fortunately, the warship was unaware of their presence, but Robinson instructed Blackie to reduce the ship's speed to a minimum. After several days of travel, they finally reached the Black Sea, where Morozov informed Robinson of the sighting of a German vessel. Subsequently, Robinson proceeded to the engine room to inspect a leak that Zaitsev and the other crew members were in the process of repairing. Blackie, who was present at the time, reported that the source of the leak had been identified. However, they needed to remove the fuel before any repairs could commence. Robinson insisted that the repairs be carried out without delay, as the ship needed to recharge its batteries and prepare for a deeper dive. Before departing, Blackie mentioned that several British crews were dissatisfied with the profit-sharing arrangement and were experiencing conflicts with the Russian crews. Initially, Robinson was skeptical, but soon after, he heard a disturbance in the kitchen and witnessed an argument between the Russian and British crews over lottery tickets. Robinson was infuriated, particularly when one of them used the radio to tune into the lottery announcements, which posed a significant risk of alerting the Russian ship. In response, Robinson destroyed the submarine's only radio and reiterated that all crew members were entitled to an equal share. He made it clear that anyone who opposed his decision or jeopardized the ship's safety would be expelled. Shortly thereafter, issues arose from the engine room when Tobin made an error while assisting Zaitsev. Fraser, who happened to be nearby, misinterpreted the situation and believed that Blackie intended to harm Tobin. In a fit of anger over Robinson's earlier decision, Fraser drew a knife, while Blackie attempted to clarify that he was merely instructing Tobin to exercise greater caution in his work. Unfortunately, in his rage, Fraser stabbed Blackie, who then collapsed, inadvertently igniting gasoline and causing a fire in the engine room. A minor explosion ensued, throwing Robinson against the wall and rendering him unconscious. Robinson lost consciousness for 18 hours, and upon regaining awareness, he discovered that his crew had divided into two factions. The Russians seized control of one side of the vessel, taking with them the entire supply of potable water. Reynolds reported significant damage to the submarine, particularly to the steering shaft, which had a limited operational window of 36 hours before all engines would fail completely. Determined to survive, Robinson approached the Russians to propose a truce. He clarified that the German submarine they were pursuing was of the same model as their current vessel, allowing them to salvage the necessary spare parts. The initial step was to ascertain the precise location of the German submarine. Subsequently, divers would be dispatched to retrieve the required components. However, due to damage sustained by the sonar in the previous incident, Baba had to rely on his auditory senses to locate the German submarine. Fraser and Zaitsev were tasked with managing the submarine while Baba utilized vibrations to identify objects in the vicinity. Fortunately, Baba detected something approximately 100 meters away, but despite the proximity, it remained uncertain whether it was indeed the submarine they sought or merely sand formations. To verify, Fraser and Peter required an additional diver, prompting Tobin to volunteer, confident in his ability to manage the task given his prior experience at a scuba diving club during his school years. The trio exited the submarine and plunged into the depths of the dark Black Sea. As a novice, Tobin felt anxious and frightened, but fortunately, Fraser was there to reassure him. Following Robinson's guidance, Fraser and the others successfully arrived at the designated coordinates, only to find themselves confronted with nothing but sand dunes. Initially, Fraser felt disheartened, believing it to be merely a sand dune. However, Tobin noticed something beneath the sand, which turned out to be the submarine, concealed under the dunes. Inside, they discovered numerous skulls. Upon reaching the engine room, they identified an identical steering shaft to the one in their own submarine and promptly took it. Meanwhile, Fraser assessed the submarine's condition and discovered the gold they had been seeking. He took the gold along with the steering shaft without first obtaining Robinson's consent. Nevertheless, Robinson soon realized they were hauling gold, as the weight was excessive for just the steering shaft. Daniels expressed skepticism about the submarine's ability to carry the load and suggested that Robinson discard some of the gold, but Robinson remained confident that they could transport both the gold and the steering shaft at once. This decision ultimately led to Peter's misfortune, as he fell into the trench while attempting to retrieve some gold bars that were slipping away. Once the gold was successfully retrieved, the crew engaged in a discussion about how to bring it to the surface. Daniels advocated for ascending due to the perilous conditions that made returning to Sevastopol risky, while the others disagreed, fearing that surfacing would expose them to a Russian patrol ship. The majority of the crew was prepared to undertake a significant risk by attempting to restart the submarine and escape from the Russian sea. Feeling voiceless, Daniels requested a private conversation with Robinson. He disclosed that Agora had been financing Robinson all along, orchestrating everything, including the ambush planned for when Robinson and his crew resurfaced. Initially skeptical, Robinson listened as Daniels provided intricate details, such as the date and location of his meeting with Kirsten at the cafe, revealing that Kirsten was merely a hired actor, similar to Lewis, who posed as his investor. Contrary to what was believed, Daniels was not Lewis's secretary, he was actually affiliated with Agora. Robinson was taken aback and promptly confined Daniels, burdened with guilt over the deaths of Blackie and Peter, which he felt were in vain. Unable to contain himself, Robinson informed the crew, who reacted emotionally and expressed a desire to kill Daniels. However, Robinson managed to pacify them by arguing that killing Daniels would be futile and would not alter their situation. Determined not to let his efforts go to waste, Robinson resolved to navigate the submarine to the Turkish Sea, where neither the Russian patrol nor Agora would dare to pursue them. This decision was undeniably perilous, as Morozov was aware of the dangers posed by the shallow and rocky seabed they would have to traverse. Nevertheless, recognizing the lack of alternatives, the crew unanimously agreed. They began by securing the steering shaft while the others calculated the gold. Daniels was once again summoned to assist Fraser, a decision that proved to be a mistake, as he incited Fraser to eliminate Zaitsev. Once preparations were finalized, the submarine was reactivated, and Zaitsev was assigned the responsibility of maintaining the stability of the shaft. Initially, the steering shaft ignited, causing the entire submarine to tremble. However, Robinson successfully stabilized the vessel at a depth of 60 meters. They proceeded without incident until Baba identified a significant crag, prompting Robinson to instruct an immediate halt. The crew collaborated effectively, and fortunately, they managed to stop the submarine before colliding with the obstacle. They had seemingly entered a shallow region, presenting them with two choices, either to reverse course or navigate through a narrow gap of less than 100 meters, which could take approximately an hour to traverse. Robinson opted for the latter, confident in Baba's ability to steer them clear of the rocks. Fraser, however, felt disheartened by this decision, believing Robinson had disregarded the safety of the crew. Unfazed by Fraser's concerns, Robinson promptly commanded the crew to return to their stations. Meanwhile, Daniels continued to urge Fraser to eliminate Zaitsev. Initially resistant, Fraser's resolve wavered after encountering difficulties while attempting to navigate the gap. He concurred with Daniels that ascending to the surface was preferable to pursuing Robinson's reckless plan, and he called for Zaitsev's assistance, only to strike him fatally with a wrench. Following this, Fraser accompanied Daniels to report Zaitsev's demise, claiming it was an accident. However, skepticism arose among the crew due to the bloodstains on Fraser's face and clothing. Daniels persistently pressed Robinson to elevate the submarine, but then a troubling situation unfolded. Fraser questioned the increasing speed without reaching the seabed, only to discover they were descending into a trench, subjecting the submarine to heightened external pressure. The entire crew, including Robinson, rushed to the engine room upon hearing of a leak, but as they managed to seal it, a larger breach emerged, and pressurized water struck Tobin, causing him to lose consciousness. Robinson and Morozov swiftly removed Tobin from the situation while the remaining crew attempted to seal the leak in the engine room. Regrettably, the leak persisted and overwhelmed their efforts. Observing the dire circumstances, Daniels realized survival was impossible, prompting him to abandon his colleagues and secure the engine room, leaving the rest of the crew behind. They were left with no option but to await their fate as the water filled the compartment. Shortly thereafter, a short circuit caused one of the lights to explode. Daniels noticed that the door could no longer withstand the influx of water, so he hurried to another door and shut it. Unexpectedly, his belt became ensnared. He called for Morozov's assistance, but Morozov declined, aware of Daniels' actions towards their friends in the engine room. Only Robinson, Morozov, and Tobin remained, fully aware that the rest of their crew had perished. Robinson retrieved the life jackets he had concealed, discovering there were only 3. Morozov was enraged to learn that his captain had hidden the life jackets, feeling guilt for his friends who were drowning below while he had the means to survive. However, there was no time for reflection. Morozov and Tobin donned the life jackets, while Robinson planned to follow through the emergency route after depressurizing the submarine. Tobin expressed a desire to take a gold bar, but Robinson prohibited it, citing potential interference with the life jacket's function. The two promptly exited the submarine through the escape hatch, and Robinson propelled them to the surface. Upon reaching the surface, Tobin was elated to see the sun again, but when Morozov caught up with him, he urged him to wait for Robinson. Unfortunately, Morozov realized that Robinson had deceived them. There was no emergency route in the submarine, indicating that Robinson had chosen to go down with the ship. Tobin was incredulous, especially when another life jacket floated nearby. Tobin thought it was Robinson, but it turned out to be all the gold bars and a photo of the Robinson family.